This is BlindManMode, where I will be trying to achieve the Old School Runescape quest cape while playing in almost complete darkness. Today I have a very interesting episode for you as we do encounter our very first PvM challenges. We are facing off against our very first quest boss, and we will be starting the process of getting our very first boss kill count. And although these things might not sound like a lot to an experienced Old School Runescape player, I can promise you that everything is way more complicated when playing blind. And in this episode you'll see exactly how difficult some of these normally very simple things can become. So thank you very much for following along with me on this journey and enjoy. In BlindManMode I will be trying to obtain the Old School Runescape quest cape while playing in almost complete blindness. But you will be able to follow along from above and see everything that happens all around me. While this is what my perspective will look like. So welcome to BlindManMode. So with all of his new fighting equipment obtained, Mr. BlindQuest thought that it would be a good idea to get some practice in fighting as well. And having heard something about some kind of an ancient demon hanging around Elvarg, he thought that it would be the perfect opportunity to get his first practice fighting a real foe. So after talking to the local gypsy, and I don't know, somehow also the local demon expert, Mr. BlindQuest learned that he needs to find a special sword in order to hurt the demon. So Mr. BlindQuest made his way towards the Elvarg palace, where he had heard that someone might help him fight that sword. And Mr. BlindQuest was already very happy about how this quest was turning out. Not only would he be able to try out his powers against a demon, he would also get a brand new sword. So having made his way to the Elvarg palace, he went in search for the knight who would help him with finding the sword. And the knight told him that in order to get the sword he would need to find 3 keys. The knight in question had one of the keys, but he had somehow dropped it down into a drain. The second key was held by another man in the Elvarg palace, the leader of the Elvarg guard, who could be found upstairs. And he handed over his key without any further issues. So while already in Elvarg, Mr. BlindQuest figured that he would go searching for the first key, which had been flushed down the drain. And Mr. BlindQuest, for some reason knowing about the infrastructure of Elvarg as well, knew that all the drains in all of the houses led down to the Elvarg sewers. And just in case, he went in search of a bucket filled with water to flush down the same drain where the knight had lost the key, just in case that it was stuck in the pipe somewhere. And after having emptied the entire bucket of water down into the drain, Mr. BlindQuest went in search of the Elvarg sewer, where he knew that he could probably find the key now. And after having some issues with finding the manhole, which I can promise you is quite difficult to find while being blind, Mr. BlindQuest finally found himself down in the Elvarg sewers. And after having stumbled around for a little bit in the sewer, Mr. BlindQuest finally found the second key, and he knew that the last key was held by one of the wizards in the wizard tower. Having been told that the wizard who held the third key always needed a lot of bones for all of his rituals, Mr. BlindQuest figured that it would be an excellent opportunity to sharpen up his combat skills while filling up his backpack with bones. So this requirement to get 25 bones in order to get the third key is very convenient at this point, as I do really want to get some more combat levels before I take on some of the combat challenges that we will be facing. But as I have explained in one of the previous videos, I will not be doing any combat training right now that doesn't have to do with one of our goals. So I will be trying to take on the Demon Slayer boss with the combat level that I will be getting after killing these 25 goblins. As a lot of the fun of this series will come from trying to fight these bosses and trying to figure out exactly how I can beat them while playing blindly. So if I got all my combat stats to level 60 and went into the Demon Slayer boss with full rune, there wouldn't be much fun in that. So having gotten a little practice with his new combat equipment, Mr. BlindQuest felt very ready to tackle the demon. And after handing over the 25 bones to the wizard gave him the third key, and now he was ready to go and find the silver light sword that he would need to slay the demon. Having filled his backpack up with wines and made his way back to Elvarg, Mr. BlindQuest went in search of the knight in the Elvarg palace who could hand him the silver light sword. And with his new sword in hand, Mr. BlindQuest made his way south towards the stone circle where he knew that the demon could be found. And since this entire fight will be taking place in a new instance of the stone circle, I will be showing the entire thing from my perspective. And let me just tell you this from the start, this will end up being a lot harder than I initially thought that it would be. When starting a new quest, I take a quick look at the wiki page before starting the quest if there is something that I don't remember, but I don't really research the quest very well. which means that I do more or less know what the quest is about and what steps I need to take, but for example for this quest I had no idea how the boss fight would actually be. So as you can see on the screen right now, when the first cutscene ended, I actually had no idea what was going on. I thought I would be alone with a big demon that I needed to slay, but clearly that wasn't the case, as I was already getting attacked by dark wizards. So I started stumbling around blindly, trying to figure out what the hell was going on and where the demon was. And realizing that I was being attacked by one of the dark wizards, which probably was level 20, I figured that this would be the perfect time to start dropping my empty jugs, which did end up causing me my first death and would have been the end of my hardcore status if I had decided to play this account as a hardcore Iron Man. So after having picked up my items, I was ready to give it another go. And after looking back at this footage, it seems very stupid to die to a dark wizard with an inventory full of wine. But now that you are seeing it all from my perspective on the full screen, you might be able to understand exactly how disorienting it is playing everything in the dark. And since I have disabled the entire minimap, I also need to get used to looking at this health bar next to the inventory. But finally, having made my way back into the stone circle, it was time to give this boss fight another go and see if I couldn't at least locate the demon this time. So I started out by trying to walk around a bit, as I figured that if there was a huge demon with me in the stone circle, it wouldn't be that hard to find, right? And I even started looking at the quest guide to be sure that I actually needed to slay the demon right now and that it was to be found in the stone circle, because I figured that when the cutscene was over I would be in the stone circle with a demon. So having completely lost my bearings at this point, I figured that maybe the best thing to do would be to try and kill all of the dark wizards, and at least if there was a demon somewhere I might be able to find it a bit more peacefully. But even killing the dark wizards turned out to be a lot easier said than done with my 5 attack and level 5 strength. And I hadn't even brought my steel scimitar, as I had recently got level 5 attack on the goblins. And I figured that since it was a big demon that I needed to slay and I had been gifted the silver light, I wouldn't need a scimitar. But now that you have gotten a true peek into the BlindManMode experience, let's speed up this footage a bit or we will be here killing dark wizards for the rest of the day. So after expertly having taken care of 2 dark wizards, which you probably can imagine took quite some time after looking at this sped up footage, I once again went in search for the demon. And after being attacked by another dark wizard and looking at his HP bar, I realized that this one was one of the high level dark wizards and I had only killed 2 of the lower level ones. So while in complete darkness, I performed a move that might even have made Wooks proud, and I went behind one of the pillars so the dark wizard couldn't attack me anymore. And while standing behind the pillar trying to figure out what to do next, I looked around with the mouse and I actually saw that the demon was right in front of me. And after realizing that I needed to switch to the other sword, I actually managed to attack the demon. And fighting the demon, I realized now that I actually didn't have any of my armor on, as I took it off to fight the dark wizards. And as I can't see my character very well in the darkness, I hadn't realized that I had no armor on, but now I can see it in the inventory. But after what turned out to be not that difficult of a fight actually, I did manage to defeat the demon. I have no idea if I got chanced a few times, as I have no idea what the max hit of the demon is, and I only had 11 HP during the fight at most, so maybe I did get chanced a few times, but we did manage to kill the demon on our only second try. But now take a look at this, which I actually think is very unfair from Jagex side. They show me the quest completed screen and I think they surely teleported me to somewhere safe, but no, they teleported me directly back into the stone circle surrounded by a dark wizard. So while I'm sitting there with my hands raised over my head celebrating a quest well done, I suddenly find myself being attacked by dark wizards, and before I can even react, I'm dead once again. So in what turned out to be a huge game from Jagex side, my 1 death Demon Slayer completion actually turned into a 2 death Demon Slayer completion, and we got our 2 first deaths on the account during the first real combat quest. So while in the rhythm of fighting Mr. Blind, Quest figured that he would go take care of another problem that he had heard about in Draenor Manor regarding a vampire. And having defeated the demon in hand-to-hand combat with a sword, Mr. Blind Quest figured that this time he would try his luck with magic. So while already in Varric, he headed to the rune store and spent a lot of his remaining money on some runes. and he made his way back to Draenor Manor, where he had heard about a guy named Morgan who was supposed to have some information about the vampire. And Morgan told him that the vampire lived in Draenor Manor, as Mr. Blindquist had already expected, and that in order to kill the vampire, Mr. Blindquist would need some garlics, which Morgan luckily had hoarded like if they were toilet paper during COVID upstairs in his cupboard. And that Mr. Blindquist would also need a stake to strike through the vampire's heart, and luckily Morgan knew about an expert in vampires who could be found in the pub in Elvarg. So after having grabbed a handful of garlics, Mr. Blindquist thought that he would stack up on some wines and take a look at the wall separating Draenor Village from Port Sarim while he was there, as he had found an imp there the last time. And while walking along the wall trying to find some imps, he got approached by the wise old man who would like him to do another mime show. And after trying his best to copy the movements of the almost invisible mime, Mr. Blindquist got gifted once again a few more pieces of the mime outfit. So if the whole adventure thing doesn't end up working out for Mr. Blindquist, he might actually have a backup career as a mime. And finding himself back at the Draenor Wall, he continued his search for the pesky imps. And in another case of luck, or maybe just pure expertise, Mr. Blindquist found another imp that walked right in front of him. But once again, the 1 in 25 beats escaped him. So Mr. Blindquist made his way back to Elvarg in search for more information about the vampire. So Mr. Blindquist made his way to the Elvarg pub and bought a beer for the so-called vampire expert, who in exchange gave him the stake needed to kill the vampire, and Mr. Blindquist was ready to make his way back to Draenor Village. And with his backpack full of wines and some runes to cast some spells, Mr. Blindquist made his way towards the Draenor Manor to find the vampire. And having found his way into the crypt, Mr. Blindquist was ready to start his second boss fight of the day. And with Mr. Blindquist being a surprisingly strong wizard and the vampire having no advantage from fighting in a dark crypt against Mr. Blindquist, who is very blind, Mr. Blindquist made quick work of the vampire. And that is Vampire Slayer done, with the reward of 3 quest points and over 4000 attack XP, which is excellent and does give us 21 attack and makes us able to wield our mithril scimitar. So after having gained all of the combat XP we will be gaining from quests before Dragon Slayer, it is time to start working towards our first boss goal, Obor. And if anyone is unaware, every time that I want to fight Obor, I will need a giant key, which is dropped by hill giants at a rate of 1 in 128 outside of the wilderness and a 1 in 64 in the wilderness. So let's start out by getting into the Edgville dungeon and try our hand against a hill giant and see how hard it would actually be with my current stats. So like I already explained with the questing, I am trying to do most things on this account without preparing too much by looking at the wiki, for example. And as it turns out, I actually don't know the Edgville dungeon at all, and I got very lost, and this was a lot harder than I thought it would be just to get to the hill giants. And with these things, the real issues always begin when there are aggressive NPCs and I'm getting lost. Without the NPCs, it might have taken me 30 or 40 minutes to get to the hill giants, but that's not a problem. I'll sit there staring at the black screen for 30 or 40 minutes if that's what it takes. But with aggressive NPCs, I will have a finite amount of food, and the longer I stay in the dungeon, the less time I have left completed. And having to look at my health bar and my remaining wines, it does also take away a lot of concentration. And if I at some point get turned around and I'm not sure in exactly what direction I'm facing, it is a huge problem, as I might start walking back to where I came from without even realizing it. But with a ton of wines remaining this time, I do lose concentration for a bit and I get comboed out very hard by the skeleton, hitting me a 4-4 back to back. And suddenly we are up to our 3rd death in this video, after not having a single death in the previous 4 videos. And being saved by a huge flashing yellow arrow, I am able to find my gravestone once again and get back on track with trying to find the hill giant. And this is actually where I got turned around the most and spent the most time stumbling around, as I managed somehow to miss the way forward and I got turned around and I walked all the way back to the start of the cave. But as this entire clip will last well over a minute in time 16, I will skip to the ending and when we get to our first hill giant fight. Having picked up a few brass keys so I can get back into the dungeon easy without having to run past all the aggressive NPCs, and with a very decreased wine supply, I finally made it to the hill giants, ready to see if I can get my first kill, which actually turned out to be a lot more difficult than I had initially expected. And I found out that I can't even prayer flick properly, as right now I would like to prayer flick 3 prayers, 2 offensive prayers and a defensive prayer, and since I don't have the prayer orbs, I can't set my quick prayers and I don't have a way to prayer flick 3 prayers at the same time. And another big issue right now is that I only have wines as food. So for the entire duration of this fight I had an attack level of 1 or 0, and it made it very difficult to hit the hill giant. So the wines are still very good for completing certain quests where I don't have to fight back, as they do heal for a lot and they are very cheap and easy to gather, but I will need some food for a lot of the content that I will face down the road, which doesn't lower my attack level. So after a very long fight, and I actually did manage to get the hill giant fairly low, I did have to give up and make it back upstairs through the ladder, which I had made sure that I was standing next to in case that I would have to make an escape. So since I am limited to free to play until I do defeat Elvarg, I am very limited in my options regarding food. So, as I will also need a lot of better food to fight Elvarg down the line, I will be starting fishing on the side while doing my quests. And as you can probably gather from my POV here on the screen, there really aren't anything especially interesting about fishing on this account. It is pretty much like fishing on a normal account, only a little bit more annoying having to find the fishing spots once in a while. Which means that unless something very interesting happens, I probably won't be showing much fishing in my future videos. So if at some point I do have an inventory full of trout or an inventory full of lobsters, that is the reason. So I wanted to include it in this video so you at least know that I will be fishing on the side while doing my quests. So if you have liked this video and you would like to see more, please do like and subscribe, as it really does make me feel good to see that people like this series. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again very soon.